Okay, with that, we come to our next panel, which will also touch on a very relevant topic, which is basically a lot of startups that I'm working with here in Romania face. How do you build transatlantic bridges between Romania and the US? And I'm very happy that we have a highly accomplished international expert who's going to host a panel on that. So please welcome Joshua Burke on stage, who is the commercial attaché at the embassy in Bucharest from the US. And he has worked across many markets, and he'll tell you all how he can make a lot of business between Romania and the US. Thank you very much.
Philip, thank you so very much for the introduction. I'm really pleased to join this panel and to join Tech-Sylvania. It's my first time at Tech-Sylvania. It's not my first time in Cluj, though. I came here for the first time about 15 or 16 years ago. It's amazing what has happened in this city and in this country since that time. But regardless of my history, I'd like to get into the topic at hand today and invite my fellow panelists to the stage. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Peter Gersak from IBM, Fred Boulanger from Macadamian, Pat Sheridan from Modus Create, and Lucas Rowe from Bigstep. Gentlemen, it's really a pleasure to have you here today. We all have stories, and we'll like to get into the discussion, stories of our own experience in our own homes, in our own home countries, stories that brought us to Romania, and stories of how tech has changed our lives and changed our businesses as well. So what Philip mentioned is my current role in the U.S. Embassy. What he didn't also mention is that I've also been an entrepreneur, I've also been an investor, and so I try to bring to this discussion a little bit of perspective, not only as a diplomat, but also as one who has put some financial skin in the game, as well as tried to learn the struggles and experience the struggles that most entrepreneurs have. And I think what we want to talk about is what are the lessons learned for Romania, but also bridges and international transatlantic bridges should go both ways. So what are the lessons learned from Romania back to North America as well? That's one of the discussions and things I would like to get into. Prior to getting into that, though, I want to give each of you a chance to introduce yourselves. Tell us about yourselves, your company, and then what brought you and your company to Romania, to Eastern Europe. And so please, let's continue. Begin. Peter?
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Josh. So, first of all, thanks for being here. My name is Peter Gersak. I work for IBM Southeast Europe as a Chief Technology Officer, which means that I bring innovation and innovative solutions to clients and bridging the gap between business and technical. That's basically my role. As you maybe know, IBM is quite present in Romania. There are approximately 3,000 people working in the organization in the so-called client innovation centers. They are in 4 cities, like Bucharest, biggest one, Brașov, Timișoara, and of course, Cluj. What we bring basically here is the international experience to Romania, and these delivery centers are working around the Europe. Why we have placed them in Romania is because simply the skills you have, the capabilities you have, the how shall I say, enthusiasm and motivation you have as a nation, yeah. So I mentioned natural science skills. This was one of the main reasons why we brought here so many people. Yeah, I mean why we employed here so many people. Maybe that would be your next question, but I have to answer. So what we basically are in Romania seeking for, trying to establish as well, is the entrepreneurship thinking. That's something I think which was very obvious on the yesterday on the hackathon. Great technical skills, great technical teams, but how to think about entrepreneurship, how to monetize then this. That's something where I would say not only Romania, but all eastern part of Europe has to think about more and learn. So, thanks.
Really useful. Thank you so much for that. Fred, tell us your story.
Yeah, actually, Fred Boulanger, thank you very much for welcoming us here. Great conference, great city, Cluj. We've been here for 12 years. I love Cluj. We have a great, talented, and dynamic team. They're integral to our success at Macadamian. We're headquartered in Canada. And we have, the reason we're here is that the talent is absolutely phenomenal. And the team here is helping people in North America stay alive, live longer. We're healthcare consultants. We build health solutions. And it's very meaningful work for us. And we're solving big problems thanks to the raw talent that is available here, and also building products that are helping our clients go faster to market. So way to go, Cluj. Keep it up. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. I'm Pat Sheridan, co-founder of Modus Create. We have an office here in Cluj. And what brought me to Cluj is open source software. So my background's in open source JavaScript frameworks. I think anyone who works in software, even if you never travel, it's an international business. And so starting in 1995 with Java, I started meeting developers around the world that were working from home, creating amazing frameworks that were, creating tons of business value. And I wondered why most of the American firms that had international software, it was just outsourcing. It wasn't really innovation or business outcomes or product development. And so we started Modus with a simple idea, which is, what does a consulting company look like if it's structured like an open source team? And through some of my personal networks and developers that I had worked with and folks from previous companies that had bought my previous consulting company, had really strong relationships in town, in Cluj. And so, the interesting thing that I think we're seeing, not just that gave us the idea to start the company, but probably talk a little bit about on the panel, is this idea that software development is rapidly changing just fundamental businesses, and the pace of new frameworks and technology is coming every 1 to 2 years versus 5 to 10 years. And so we're trying to build a company that stays ahead of that curve, as opposed to companies that just kind of used to just present we just maintain low-end commodity software. So anyway, excited to be here and chat.
Thanks so much.
I'm the CEO of Bigstep. My exposure to Romania actually came more than 12 years ago. My previous company, which is a web hosting company, we bought a company in Bucharest, based out of Bucharest. And since then, maintained a presence. So after I sold the last company, I did not sell our Romanian branch. I kept that, and then used the people. I should not say use the people. I say the people in Bucharest became really a foundation for the next startup, which is the Bigstep, which is essentially a big data service. So we provide we enable companies to build data lakes, essentially build their own data hub, and be able to perform analytics, predictive analytics on their data. So I really love the people here. Nowadays I actually spend almost half of my time in Romania. So I love the people. I love the culture, and I think I really hope to be part of long-term, in being able to work with them.
Gents, thanks so much for the introduction, telling us more about who you guys are. So let's dive into a couple of questions here. So as I mentioned, the topic of our panel is building transatlantic bridges. And bridges in terms of ecosystem, in terms of knowledge, you all have experience in Europe, in North America, specifically in Romania. You've seen some of the talent, and there have been some lessons learned, I'm sure, within your companies. But let's take a question in two parts. So with this concept of the bridge, with information going for both directions, let's first talk about, what are the know-how and the best practices specifically, and let's try to use specific examples, please, of what you and your company and your culture from either Canada or from Germany or from the US have brought and shared with Romania. And then similarly, I would like you to address, what has your company learned from the talented people that are in this city and in this country that you've implemented worldwide? And again, I'd like you to try and think of some specific examples. So if you don't mind, Lucas, you've mentioned that you've had some success selling one of your companies and that you've grown your companies here. So maybe we can start with you, and then we'll turn to some other panelists to share some of their stories. So any specific insights that you could point to with this concept of best practices going both ways?
Related to which one?
Either one.
So for us, we've seen that people here are very hardworking. They are very technology oriented. And they were able to handle a lot of tasks that traditionally, if you tell people in the U.S., for example, that we have operations in Romania, the first thing they think of is coders. So to a large extent, obviously, there are a lot of great programmers that's based out of Romania, but it's beyond that. Our company actually has pretty much every function of a company. We have people in Romania doing it, from product development, from HR, finance, pretty much all the functions, and they do it very well. So I think because of the also advances in terms of the spread of the knowledge that gets spread very quickly. A lot of the best practices in the U.S. and internationally, they get adopted relatively quickly. So you have people that can learn quickly. So we found actually the people to be quite eager to learn and adapt technologies, and not just being able to adapt, but also propose some new practices and whatnot, that I found to be quite refreshing, and I thought is kind of leading class.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Pat, tell us some examples from your end.
Yeah, I'll add a couple things. So the first is, engineering culture is kind of company culture, right? I think you see a lot of ping pong tables and foosballs is almost a joke in some startups.
We're going to start implementing those at the embassy.
Good luck with that. So the guys that I knew in Cluj from open source, there's this core values that we would say are active, visible, and relevant, right? Being an engineer, a good engineer, is similar in some ways to like being a musician. If I Google your name, will I pull up results on the JavaScript frameworks that you've worked on, or any open source project? And so we think about the company broadly, globally, as just a platform for developers to build their personal brand, to contribute, gain real-world experience, but then share that knowledge. And so before we were a company, we were just an idea, we created a couple of JavaScript meetups just to meet, other developers, and now we've got like the largest JavaScript meetup in New York City and Washington, D.C. And so when new engineers join, whether they're, US or international, there's someone there to mentor them, to basically say, what are you learning in your consulting you can write a blog about? What are you learning in your consulting you can speak at a local meetup about? Are you contributing to an open source framework? And so our kind of, I think when you get to the other side of that, this idea of, what is your career path going to be? And so when I was an engineer, everything was like, are you going to be a Java server-side architect, right? I don't know, the older guys in the area or gals here, how many folks thought, 10 years ago, will I be writing JavaScript full stack? And so there's this idea in the US of, should I stay employed for 10 years at the same place, right? Maybe I should if I'm moving up every year, but if I'm not, I should be going to places that allow me to learn new skills, to become more valuable in the market. And so for us, whether you're in the US or whether you're international, there's this kind of implicit career path, which is skills development. And I think engineers, and you see it, right, when people leave, you could be the top engineer at a crappy company, right? No one wants to do that. They want to be contributing and putting leverage. And so for us, because we have teams that will never be in the same office, the question is, what do we do to actually then build the human side of a corporate culture? And so some of the things that we found is like, you might be a JavaScript engineer, but you also like mountain biking. And so is there a Strava group of all the folks that are seeing who put up the most, miles or kilometers or whatever, right? And so there's a lot of ways for, I think, distributed teams to have a high culture and an output-driven, kind of results-oriented culture. But then there's a lot of things that companies, I think, a lot of companies, whether it's product or service, business, could be doing better to really be investing in the success of the team. And so trying to just incorporate that into, actual meetups, actual open source repos that you contribute to, I think goes a long way.
I think that's really useful because what you're talking about now is for every organization a challenge that they have, which is how do you integrate members of your team, especially in the day and age when you have team members that are global, that have different perspectives, and that oftentimes are physically not co-located. And so when you have and we're sort of deviating a little bit, but this is another great question that brings up. So let's just kind of flow with the conversation. Like, how are you integrating, these global team members that you have with your other teams in Washington or with IBM, your teams around the world, and how do you integrate Romania into that as well? So that's another thing we can touch on as we go forward here. Let's move down down the row.
Yeah, so I mean, lots of what Patrick has mentioned and Luke has mentioned as well are the reasons we're here. One thing that when it's time to actually work together, how is it that you facilitate this to your question, and how is it that you leverage everybody's talent? And for us, being in the consulting in the healthcare world, like encouraging folks to actually create thought leadership, going deep into what is it that they know and what is it that they truly know, and publishing this so that we actually can commercialize ourselves even more is super important. Then we actually are building within the organization what we call community of practices, because we have 4 or 5 sites, and getting people to actually work together around a security problem or around security certifications or around healthcare healthcare protocols and the likes is super important. How is it that you share this knowledge and get everybody to benefit from everyone else is super important. And it's not because, in the days and age that we are, intelligence is distributed everywhere in the world. And how is it that you can get your organization to leverage everything that your organization has got to give? And it's not because it's in the US or in Canada that things are better there. Like, there are things going on in Cluj here that the Cluj team is a leader for, just like in Armenia, just like in Canada, that they are spearheading, and it's finding those anchors of I guess, a community of practice or center of excellence and driving that into the organization and giving them the leadership to drive this into the organization, that you leverage everybody's intelligence and bring it to the table and finding ways to make this however it fits in your organization. That is super important. And if there was something that I noticed over the years here I guess it's a universal problem, but maybe more acute in Eastern Europe and other developing, I don't want to say developing countries, but like less commercially aware country. Like when you go in North America, people are a lot more commercially aware than people in Cluj or in Romania. And so for us, helping our folks have trips over in Canada, have trips over in the US to see what the market really is all about the people that we help build solutions is super important. And we found tremendous value in having folks travel back and forth between Canada and Romania in order to get to know each other a lot better, but also get to know what our customers are all about and what is the realities of our customer. Because when we work in our own bubble, it's not obvious that we get to understand what really the realities of our customers are, and getting people to seize what that is and understand is super important. And commercialization, being aware of your customer, is and will ever be the nature of business altogether.
And I think what I hear you saying is that you're using the global teams that you have and the team in Romania to help inform and teach everything that you're doing back home, and then by extension that improves your ability to serve your customers.
Right on.
Right, thank you. IBM, so it's a small company.
Yeah, it's a small company of 380,000 people.
Startup.
100 years old startup. So, after the Y2K, we started to feel that our products are not really customer focused so much. So we started to think about, okay, what shall we do about it? And internally, for our internal development, we are using design thinking now. We have sensed that design thinking was appropriate for smaller teams, co-located teams, yeah. So we have created a methodology on top of this in order to facilitate larger teams which are disparate around different geographies and so on. So that's how we come and use the skills and capabilities we have around the globe. Okay? And now what we do as well, and that's also one of my tasks, to enable, so we go around and we enable like almost all of IBMers with design thinking. So everybody knows what design thinking is. Everybody can use design thinking for his daily activity. And then regarding I will just mention this because guys, what mentioned here, centers of competence, Academy of Technology, we have many ways, many initiatives inside the corporation to get people together. What I wanted to mention as well is that the bridge is always, it's not always obvious, but it should be two-way. Yeah? So the way to mother company, to US, basically is from Romania. There are centers inside IBM and people who are developing core products like for Watson. So we have in Cluj people who are developing the Watson product. You might don't know this, but the engine which is scoring results in artificial intelligence in Watson services, it's produced here basically. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then we have in Bucharest, we have Cognos team, Easy Source team. So there are a lot of parts in Bucharest which are exporting knowledge to mother company in US.
It's really useful. And as I hear you talk, I'm also reminded of a now really famous quote by one of your founders as well, which is talking about failure as a concept. How do you fail more? How do you fail better? How do you as an organization, as a person, take failure as an example? And so just as that lesson I think has tremendous implications on a city that is branding itself as a startup city. And Cluj can't do failure alone, though, from a policy perspective. So a question then is how, and this for any of the panelists, not necessarily in order, but how, and give us another example of failure in your organization, how that has helped transform your organization. So we already heard from IBM as a founder, so let's move forward.
So failing sucks, right? I mean, no one wants to fail. I think it's more learning than failing. So there's a couple, from a business perspective, right? There's two ways to fund things that turn into how software gets done. There's big budgets that can fund big teams for a long time, and that model is quickly eroding. Then there's progressive investment. And so when you think about high-risk work or work that has a lot of business uncertainty, you have to manage that very different than low-risk work. And so what I think that could mean for Cluj is, look, big outsourcing companies that came here were just looking for big blocks of labor to work on, very commoditized work. And a lot of technology challenges within that, but you're going to maintain the banking system forever. The new economy is we build a prototype, we test customers, right? All the hand-waving on lean startup and all the rest of that. But it essentially is progressive investment. Prove to me it's worth investing another 90 days in this, right? So from a business perspective, I saw a lot of companies, sold my company to a firm that raised a lot of money and wanted to just kind of have American leadership and Romanian engineering. And our orientation and being self-funded was we don't want investors to tell us what to do, but we can only make money on things people are willing to pay us for. And so when we think about kind of the new organizational design for success, whether it's Cluj or Costa Rica or anywhere that we have teams, is this idea that you have functional leadership. So you could work in the US, but you're going to report to our director of engineering in Cluj. You could be on the UX team in Costa Rica and report to the head of UX in Moldova or Croatia or wherever. And so this entire idea that as an engineer, I see technologies that are interesting, I see technologies that are ready for scale, and do I have a feedback loop in my organization to hand that to the folks that can say to the clients, oh, you should think about modernizing your code base and moving it to AWS because your particular challenges are now ready to be met there. And so in that way, the engineers, the teams in Cluj working kind of with consultants become the sales team. You don't need some big account manager. What you need is folks on the ground solving problems for clients. But when you look at high-risk things or emerging tech, you have to kind of make a lot of small bets. And for us, again, our blog is kind of the indicator of that when people start reading certain blogs on we get about 100,000 visitors a month to our blog, then people start asking, oh, we saw you wrote this thing on, some new JavaScript framework or what have you. So it's a different mindset, I think, top to bottom, and it really requires, not just the engineers to be thinking about Agile and Lean and these things, but really their boss, the business folks, the folks that traditionally just think of their role as selling.
Thank you.
So I'll add to this, and because there's the short feedback loop. Like this is one of our. We always say this. Good news travels as fast as bad news at the speed of light. They both need to go at the same speed so that we can act on them. And then, as you said, in terms of learnings, failure is learning. But in our case, is how is it that you encourage people to take chances, right? So if you're 80% sure of something, inform and initiate. Don't ask permission. Just go. And we got your back. And if you fall flat, we'll figure it out. We'll have something in place there. So in the context of Cluj and what is it that could be done for Cluj to spur something there, as much as those principles are true and should be employed, in my view, what I see over and over everywhere I go, in Canada and elsewhere, in here and in Armenia where we have another office, is commercialization savviness needs to be honed up. And not enough money, not enough time, not enough mentorship is actually being pushed to the entrepreneurs, to the folks that are super strong technically, but at the end of the day, they're solving a problem that they believe in their head is an important problem, but we have to go get that tested by the market right away. And we must be religious about hitting the market with our ideas and our prototypes and our progress all the time so that the market decides if our idea is worthy or not. And having this discipline inculcated, or I don't know what the word is, but driven into the heads of folks that are technical is really not easy. So if I had an advice for Cluj, for example, is how is it that we can band together the successful entrepreneurs of Cluj so that they can give back to the new generations of entrepreneurs that are trying out their hands right now in the marketplace, so that they benefit from their wisdom, that they benefit from their scars that they have in their back for having been wrong and near fatal errors and everything, so that they can actually have this discipline of talking to the marketplace all the time, so that they innovate for a problem that somebody is willing to pay for, not something that they believe is a good idea.
This is really, really important, and I think it drives home something that I hear frequently, not only in Romania, but throughout Eastern Europe. And there is a culture, for numerous historical reasons, of lack of adequate risk-taking that you would find sometimes in North America or even in Western Europe. In fact, there's a phrase in Romanian, mă scuzați dacă fac greșeală, dar cine nu muncește, nu greșește. So,
my Romanian is pretty bad.
So, the one who does not work does not make mistakes. And this is a phrase that needs to come out of the vocabulary. It's a phrase that needs to come out of the culture. So if you're going to grow yourself as an individual, grow your company as a business, grow your city and to grow your country, you have to change the culture, and that starts by taking some risks, taking some challenges, and making sure that management, whether it's Romanian, international, or has your back, provides you adequate air cover, and says, you know what, good on you for trying something. You know what, we're going to go a different direction, but I want you to come up with 10 more ideas next week. And that needs to be reinforced at the company level, and frankly, it needs to be reinforced at the national level as well. So we have just a couple of seconds to close out here. So let's get one final thought from each of you. So Lucas, a final thought you'd like to leave with the audience here about your experience and this transatlantic bridge that we're building.
I think the biggest thing is Romania in general, not just Cluj. I think we have to, move up through the value chain, so to speak. Just like China has transformed from the low labor cost-based economy to a knowledge-based economy, we're trying to. Romania traditionally has been based on low-cost developer talent to really build the software for the world, to much more innovation-driven, based on the local talent and innovation, so that the labor cost is really a secondary factor, especially as the labor cost continues to goes up especially over the last 5-10 years.
Cool. So, I guess I would say, I spent my whole career, for the most part, as an engineer in the U.S. And a lot of engineers are paranoid, right? So engineers in the U.S. say, what are you doing opening an office in China or Romania? When I talk to engineers in Romania, they're like, why would we open an office in another country, right? Skills accretion is the enemy, right? There's always going to be, I think as many of the other panelists mentioned, there's only going to be more countries and systems coming online, and anywhere there's internet and talent, there can be a developer. I think the thing that excites me just coming to Cluj is, to see a whole city and an economy driven by people between 20 and 40 years old is cool. It's awesome. And it's kind of like, regardless of frustrations with politicians or traditional business leaders, like, you just got to keep doing your thing and power through, and the change will continue to happen. So keep it up.
Thanks, Pat. Fred,
All
real
right.
quick.
Quickly here, I love the welcoming of this town. I've always enjoyed visiting Cluj for its people, and I guess the message to you guys is, the world is your oyster. Just go for it. Like there's Silicon Valley out there. There's like whoever, like the Israelis that are super successful, and you guys can be successful too. And you have the talent, you have the problem-solving skills. Just go for it. Get out there, talk to the market, and get things done.
Thanks. Peter.
Yeah. I will be very short. I think we are out of time. Yeah. So my my final thought would be, you have the infrastructure, you have the ecosystem, you have the technical skills. Universities are great. So try to build more technical thought leadership, that would be one. And secondly, try to understand end client. Try to understand why are you doing it for. Try to understand what's the added value of what you are doing. And that means in terms of developing entrepreneurship thinking much, much more as you have it today.
Thank you so much for that. And I would like to issue a challenge to everyone here, which is from a book that I'm reading now, from the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And so your challenge by the end of the conference tomorrow is to get the phone number from someone that you find attractive, whether you're married or you're not. I'm married, and I will accept the challenge. I'll tell my wife, right? But I want you to take risks and incorporate risks into your daily life, incorporate it into your business, and help change this culture and bridge the Transatlantic with us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. And thank you all also for being strong supporters of the local ecosystem. It's very, very important to do that. So I highly appreciate that you all come here, and not only once, but on a regular basis. So I think this is really, really important to build this international connection. So I'm very grateful for that.